You may think of the BMW i5 as a contemporary electric version of the ordinary 5 Series, and that may be because that's exactly what it is. However, the name itself has a history going as far back as 2016. As an addition to the i3 and i8, an i5 was supposed to join the range alongside them as a mid-size liftback, with styling that proves my long-held theory. If all species eventually evolve into crabs, all electric cars eventually evolve into the Chevy Volt. It only took the Japanese platform for patent information leaking these pictures of the unreleased i5 to prove my theory. As recent history has shown us, the Corsicar name now has enough weight to make automakers rethink their choices and cancel upcoming cars altogether. You know, I just complained about the RSX's name. I did not wish for them to flush billions down the toilet, but alas, that's my influence. In honor of this achievement, let's have a look at more cars that have been left to rot in the backseat of history, that never had the chance of reaching the public eye, that were shot in the face with a shotgun while trying to get a glimpse of the outside world. And to perhaps make it a tad more exciting, let's go on a little adventure around the world to see what we missed out on. Starting off in the US of A, my least favorite place. Let me ask you this. What's more American than apple pie, baseball, Ronald Reagan? That's right, rebadging minivans. You'd be hard pressed to find a single American people carrier that hadn't been mutilated to fit multiple brands. But surprisingly, we have actually missed out on a few more of these as well. Take, for example, the most famous American minivan, the Chrysler Corporation lineup of vans, with the Dodge Caravan, Plymouth Voyager, and eventually the Chrysler Town & Country completing the lineup. As development of the second generation vans was underway, a fourth option was also being considered. And the fun game we can play now is, can you even think of what brand this fourth van would have been sold under? It was Eagle. It was going to be an Eagle minivan. Design-wise, appears to be essentially identical to its brothers, but those gold-colored wheels and accents along the sides do stick out. Also notice how the headlights and grille aren't surrounded by chrome strips, as was the case with the cheaper Dodge, but not with the Plymouth variant. Do these details imply it was going to sit in between those two when it came to pricing? I don't know, because in this picture it does have the chrome strips. Probably for the best this never saw the light of day. Really, that could also be said for this next one. The 1996 U-Body GM vans were sold under 6 different brands across the whole globe. Opel, Chevy, Oldsmobile, Buick, Vauxhall, Pontiac all took their turns with this poor thing. But notably, Holden in Australia never got to have a go at sharing it for themselves, despite usually being GM's official dumping ground of anything and everything they were producing at any given time. Not to say GM wasn't developing a Holden version of the Opel Sintra, of course they were. The way we know this is by looking at official General Motors parts diagrams for the Sintra, like part number 6320040, or the front radiator grille. It's got the diagram for the Opel, for the Vauxhall, and for one with a Holden badge. This can be seen with multiple other parts that include badging, a Holden variant alongside the other 2 that did actually make it to production. Congratulations, you've now seen some 30-year-old Opel parts diagrams. On that note, let's now sail across the Atlantic over to Europe, where I can tell you about Saab's aborted GMT 256 platform SUV. The idea was good. Take the platform shared between the Pontiac Aztek and Buick's Rendezvous and smother it with Saab styling, stick a turbocharged Opel V6 in it, and that's about it. This was genuinely a pretty good idea and would have allowed Saab to get on the fledgling SUV market of the early 2000s pretty early on. But alas, the project was killed off relatively early on, and instead the 97X got to be Saab's first SUV. What a hit! If you've ever wondered why the 4th generation Renault Espace had an unusually long lifespan of 13 years, this is your home. I've also wondered the same thing, and as I'm glad to report, Renault was actually intending to launch an all-new 5th gen model in 2010, which would have left the previous model with a completely respectable 8-year run. As we can see, the X97 project Renault were developing followed in the convention of previous models and was a rather safe MPV, which could explain why the French suddenly got cold feet about the thing. Sales numbers of the Espace had been steadily declining before the tentative 2010 reveal, which could have eventually resulted in the cancellation of the project and led to reworking the model into the crossover SUV/MPV that was then ultimately launched in 2014. That's the theory that seems to make the most sense, so it probably isn't true. Nevertheless, for the model that did eventually come out, the company was also looking at a more coupe-ified version to sell alongside it, called R-Space. Not long after that, Renault was planning on adding their contribution to the short lineage of crossover sedans, following up the likes of the Subaru Legacy SUS and Volvo S60 Cross Country with this. A Renault Taliant X. If these spy shots don't do enough for you, then don't worry. People did spot an actual picture of it inside the owner's manual for the Dacia Jogger. This model was most likely intended for the Russian market, because the roads suck ass. But Renault pulled out of Russia in 2022, you might know why, and this model went in the trash. Hey, speaking of Russia, China! Here's the Huansu C60, you've probably seen it. Just like the designers of it had seen the Lamborghini Urus. Funnily enough, I don't think it ever actually made it to mass production, as the Huansu brand was killed off before that could happen. I think that was the least memorable 20 seconds of Corsica car ever, so let's go to Brazil. I imagine a large portion of you are already aware of Dodge's escapades in Latin America, where, for a while, they were selling rebadged Hyundais as Dodge models. The Hyundai Accent became the Dodge Attitude, and the Hyundai i10 became the Dodge i10. Except that even calling them rebadges is giving them way too much credit. This isn't a picture of a Hyundai i10, this is a Dodge i10. They couldn't even be bothered to change the brand badges, it's insane. Anyway, those cars were the result of a partnership forged between Hyundai and Daimler Chrysler to develop a line of shared engines. Around the same time, Chrysler also began a working partnership with Nissan, which resulted in this. The Dodge Trazo C 1.8. You may be wondering, what the hell does this have to do with Nissan? It clearly has a Trazo badge up front, not a Nissan one. The thing is, as keen observers may have already spotted, this is actually a Nissan in disguise. A Tiida to be exact, and not an original Dodge model. It might be hard to believe, but you have to trust me on this one. From these pictures, you may have noticed that the car was actually publicly revealed to the public. That's how close it was to going on sale. Not sure we ever saw it in any color other than red, though. So what happened to the Trazo? Chrysler's bankruptcy happened. You know what happened exactly 414 days after that? Toy Story 3 was released. Really makes you think. All that remains of the Dodge Trazo C 1.8 today is an ancient, seemingly test website that's still online for whatever reason. Really, this thing was in the same boat as a whole lot of American cars being developed during the late 2000s, being a casualty of just poor product planning decisions. Ford was planning a comeback of the Mercury Tracer nameplate based on the Ford Focus before the entire Mercury brand was canned. A direct competitor from General Motors and a successor to the earlier Ion, the Saturn Evoque, was also cancelled, rather close to production, may I add, with GM then scrambling to offer the European-made Saturn Astra in its place. The codename for the Evoque, GMX002, is actually mentioned in documents you can view online that were published as part of the massive GM ignition switch recall, which resulted in nearly 30 million cars being recalled. Oh dear. How do we end up back in America? Don't forget to subscribe and obviously smash that like button. And here's our new members: Karbachta, Reagan Lee, Anthony Frankus, Asfarantisi, Droopy Balls, Stylus, Michael Kake, Asian, Sam Eric Edge, Seetha Doe, Jake Helfrich, Stephen Byron, Mike 1985, I would love to know what year you were born, Peugeot 206, Mathis Hutta, Marundi, Ozan Azizoglu, April Adams, Matej Kopaka, Dave Anoki, Mings, Charles Carney, Michael Morrison, Jason Anderson, Manuel Emiliano Aguilar Cantu, and Black Mesa Hero, Gordon Freeman.